The tragedy of Snoop Dogg is that he wins every battle the world can see, but loses the battles no one sees. We remember the laid-back rap voice, as if time itself had to slow down just to keep pace with him. The smooth G-funk rhythms that turned everything into an endless summer. The genius who transformed hip-hop into pure joy. Over 150 million records sold. A cultural icon who carried the Olympic torch. A man America now calls a national treasure. But what we often fail to see is the silent pain behind that ease. A wound carried from childhood that no stage, no round of applause, can truly erase. Calvin Cortazar Broadus Jr. was born on October 20, 1971, in Long Beach, California. His father, Vernel Varnado, was a Vietnam veteran. He didn't die. He didn't have an accident. He simply was not present. He came and went and came. There was no funeral to grieve. There was no before and after moment to split life into two halves. There was only a prolonged, vague emptiness. Some children lose their fathers to accidents, to illness. And though the pain is sharp, at least they know one thing for certain. Their father loved them. He just could not stay. Calvin never got to know that. Calvin only knew his father was not home. And no one told him why. While his father was absent, his mother, Beverly Tate, worked every job she could find. She scraped by dollar, keeping the roof from caving in through the pure will of a single mother who refused to let circumstances dictate her children's fate. She looked at her second son and smiled. He looked like Snoopy the dog from the Peanuts comic strip, so she called him Snoopy. A small detail. But in a house without a father, a mother's gentle nickname for her child was proof that love still existed through everything. But Long Beach in the 1980s waited for no one. The East Side neighborhood where Calvin grew up was among the areas hardest hit by the crack cocaine crisis ravaging black communities across America. Poverty, violence, drugs. Those three things were the default. Calvin got involved with the Rollin' 20s Crips gang as a teenager. No father. School couldn't hold him. Neighbors, friends, the kids he played with every day, one by one went to prison. The gang became family. A place where an invisible kid at least got recognized by someone. Even if the price was freedom and quite possibly his life. Right after graduating high school in 1989, Calvin was arrested for possession of cocaine. It wasn't the last time. He was arrested multiple times in the following years for drug-related offenses. Each time returning to the same old path because no one showed him another way. But Calvin still had one thing. Amid his father's absence, amid the police sirens and gunshots in the night, Calvin had a voice he knew how to use. From a young age, he listened to Funkadelic, Parliament, George Clinton, artists whose G-funk ran in his blood like a second mother tongue. At Long Beach Polytech, he started rapping, not because he wanted fame, but because the microphone was the only place his voice carried weight. On the streets of East Side, Calvin was just a name on the list of Crips kids America had long forgotten. But on the mic, he was somebody. The mic did not judge him. The mic did not leave. When Calvin picked up the mic, the confusion about his absent father went quiet. He didn't rap about the pain. He rapped with the pain, turning it into rhythm, into rhyme, into something that made others stop and listen. Every beat he laid words over was a silent conversation with a future version of himself. In 1992, a demo tape was passed hand-to-hand through Warren G. and reached exactly the ears searching for something that had never existed. Andre Romel Young, who had just left NWA to found Death Row Records with Marion Suge Knight, pressed play and heard a rap voice unlike anything dominating the streets at the time. In an era when every rapper shouted, rushed, tried to cram as many words as possible into every beat, the voice on that tape did the opposite. It slowed down. It was lazy, almost to the point of provocation. It floated over the beat like a man strolling through a battlefield while everyone else was running. Dre didn't need to hear it a second time. He invited Calvin, already using the stage name Snoop Doggy Dogg, to the studio immediately. And what happened next changed hip-hop history forever. Snoop appeared on Dr. Dre's album The Chronic, released in December 1992, on which the two hits Nothing But a G-Tang and Dre Day became anthems for an entire generation. But more important than any hit was what happened between those two men. Dre was not just a producer. Dre was the first older man in Calvin Broadus's life who looked at him and said, "I believe in you." His father never said those words or was never around long enough to say them. Dre said them by opening the studio door and letting Calvin walk in. And Calvin walked in as if he had been waiting for that door his whole life. Snoop's debut album, Doggy Style, released on November 23, 1993, on Death Row Records, immediately shattered every record. It debuted at number 1 on the Billboard 200. It sold more than 800,000 copies in its first week alone, a number unseen for a hip-hop debut album at that time. Gin and Juice and What's My Name were not just songs. They became the common language of an entire generation of American youth. From black neighborhoods in Compton to white college dorms in Connecticut, everyone was listening. And the greatest paradox sat right in the sound. Snoop's music sounded as if nothing in the world was worth worrying about. Smooth G-funk, laid-back rap, slow beats like an endless summer. While his real life at that moment was a non-stop chain of things worth worrying about. That easy rap voice was not the truth. It was armor. The slower he rapped, the more he felt he controlled something. Rhythm, words, melody, in a life that had never given him control over anything. But the label behind that success was no place for the faint of heart. Death Row Records, co-founded and run by Suge Knight, was the most powerful empire in early 90s hip-hop and also the most dangerous. Knight was notorious for accusations of using violence, threats, and intimidation to control his artists. Money poured in like water, but the darkness was just as thick. Snoop, 21 years old, stepped into that empire with the eyes of a kid who had just escaped the streets and had not yet realized that a studio could be as dangerous as an East Side street corner. He signed a contract, recorded, performed, and became the face of Death Row. Not knowing that 30 years later, he himself would buy the label, turning the prisoner into the prison's owner. But that was later. At this moment in the early 90s, Snoop Dogg stood at the center of America's most intense cultural storm. Gangsta rap was not just a music genre. It was a war. Politicians denounced it on the floor of Congress. Parents burned CDs in front of school gates. Mainstream media called it a threat to American family values. And Snoop Dogg with his Crips tattoos, drug record, and unapologetic lyrics became the perfect symbol of everything America both feared and could not stop listening to. The younger generation looked at him and saw freedom. The parents' generation looked at him and saw danger. Both were right. But while Doggy Style was selling millions of copies and the name Calvin Broadus was becoming the most mentioned name in the music industry, the American justice system was preparing to introduce him to a completely different kind of spotlight. On August 25, 1993, exactly 3 months before Doggy Style's release, Snoop's bodyguard, McKinley Lee, shot and killed Philip Woldemariam, a gang member, while Snoop was sitting behind the wheel of the car. Both Snoop and Lee were charged with first-degree murder. The contrast was unbelievable. The same person, the same period of time. By day, his voice rang out from every radio across America. His debut album was breaking sales records. His name was printed on the covers of every major music magazine in the world. By night, he sat with attorney Johnny Cochran preparing testimony for a trial that could end in a life sentence. 21 years old, no life experience. A #1 album in the country and a murder charge happening at the same time. Not alternating, not one after the other, but stacked on top of each other like two songs playing simultaneously in the same room. The trial dragged on from 1993 all the way to February 1996, nearly 3 years. International media followed every session closely. Cameras awaited outside the courthouse every day. And throughout those 3 years, Snoop had to live a double life that no one in their early 20s should have to live. Recording his second album, The Dogfather, performing in front of tens of thousands of fans across America, appearing on television, promoting, giving interviews, then returning to the lawyer's office, putting on a suit, standing before a jury, and listening to strangers decide whether he would remain free. The stage at night gave him cheers. The courtroom in the morning could take everything away. He always insisted it was legitimate self-defense. On February 20th, 1996, the jury acquitted both Snoop Dogg and McKinley Lee. He walked out of the courtroom a free man. But 3 years living under the shadow of prison had changed him in a way no verdict could reverse. This was not a career turning point. This was a turning point in awareness. The courtroom did not care about platinum plaques. The judge did not care about the laid-back rap voice. In those 3 years, Calvin Broadus learned a lesson no university teaches and no record captures. That outside of music, freedom is never guaranteed. No matter who you are, no matter how many millions of copies you sell, no matter if the whole world knows your name. Most careers would have ended there. Most 24-year-old kids would have pulled back, would have disappeared. But Snoop Dogg did what the world had never seen a gangster rapper do before. He evolved, not once, not twice, but continuously without stopping for the next 3 decades. The first decision he made after being acquitted was the most important decision of his life outside of music. Leaving Death Row Records, leaving Suge Knight, leaving the empire that had turned him into a star, but was also the place where violence, control, and fear seeped into the studio walls. In 1998, he signed with Master P's No Limit Records, a label completely different in culture and way of operating. This decision was not just a label switch. This was the first time in Calvin Broadus's life that he actively chose his path instead of being swept along by the current. The boy who grew up without a father, with no one to show him the way, who was pulled into the gang because he had no choice, who was swallowed by death row because it was the only door that opened, that boy for the first time at age 26 drew his own map. And from then on he never stopped redrawing it. From the late 90s into the early 2000s, Snoop began doing what no gangsta rapper had successfully done before him, completely transforming his image without losing his identity. He started appearing in comedy films, commercials, reality TV shows, even voicing animated movies. Critics called it selling out. They were wrong. This was not selling out. This was survival skill. The same instinct that had helped young Calvin survive the streets of East Side Long Beach now helped Snoop Dogg survive the entertainment industry. Adapt or die, evolve or be forgotten. And nothing proved that capacity for evolution more clearly than the friendship no one on the planet could have predicted. In 2016, VH1 launched Martha and Snoop's Potluck Dinner Party, a cooking show co-hosted by 2 people who seem to come from parallel universes. Martha Stewart, the white billionaire homemaking queen, symbol of American upper-class refinement, and Snoop Dogg, former Crips member, gangster rapper, symbol of the black streets. But beneath that complete opposite surface, the two shared something few recognized right away. Both had been to prison. Martha for securities fraud in 2004, Snoop for the murder charge in 1993. Both had been judged by America, and both had stood back up. Their friendship became one of the most beloved relationships in American pop culture. Living proof that people can cross every boundary society draws. The boy who once could not walk 2 blocks without being stopped by police was now cooking Thanksgiving dinner on national television with the woman America loved most. If that was not a standing ovation from a world that once saw him as the enemy, then nothing is a standing ovation. Alongside the cultural transformation, Snoop built a business empire whose scale left most of his peers in awe. He launched Leafs by Snoop, the first legal cannabis brand bearing an artist's name. He founded Doggyland, an educational YouTube channel for children. The greatest paradox of all, the gangster rapper once charged with murder, now teaching kids to sing about kindness, sharing, and brushing their teeth. But the peak of all peaks came in February 2022 when Snoop received the call he would not have dared dream of 30 years earlier. Death Row Records was up for sale and he was the buyer. The very label that had once controlled him under Suge Knight. The very place he signed a contract as a 21-year-old kid who had no idea what he was walking into now belonged to him. The prisoner bought the prison. The circle closed. And then, also in February 2022, he stood on the stage at SoFi Stadium in Inglewood, California during the Super Bowl 56 halftime show with Dr. Dre, Eminem, Mary J. Blige, and Kendrick Lamar. 120 million viewers across America. 30 years after the Chronic, the people who had changed the face of hip-hop stood together on stage one last time, not as survivors, but as kings returning. Snoop took a knee on the stage, an image that recalled Colin Kaepernick, that recalled an entire history of struggle, and 120 million people saw it. 2 years later, in July 2024, NBC invited him to be a special correspondent for the Paris Olympics. He carried the Olympic torch through the streets of St. Denis. He swam with Michael Phelps, jumped with Simone Biles, and turned every moment he touched into content that millions of people could not stop sharing. The media no longer called him a rapper. The media called him an American national treasure. And that is the greatest paradox in this entire 30-year story. America, the very country that once saw him as a threat to social values, that once put him on trial for murder, that once wanted to erase his name from every radio station, now competed to call him its own. But while the world was crowning him, his own world kept catching fire. On September 15, 2019, Snoop's oldest son, Cord, welcomed his third child into the world. Cord already had a son, Zion, and a daughter, Elian, now adding a baby boy with his girlfriend. They named the child Kylo. The baby was born in the hospital and never left the hospital. 10 days. Kylo lived for 10 days. On September 25, 2019, the baby died in a neonatal intensive care unit. Cord posted a video on Instagram, his daughter Elian, 13 months old, kissing her little brother for the last time in the hospital room, someone holding the motionless newborn. Under the video, Cord wrote one sentence, and that sentence weighed more than anything else in this entire story. "My son died in my arms. My son did everything he needed to do in his 10 days on this earth. He graduated and continued his work. He died in my arms, and the feeling of that energy will never leave me." Snoop did not comment publicly. Not a single line, not a single video. His silence said more than any rap he had written in 30 years of his career. No stage, no microphone, no platinum plaque could fill the silence of a grandfather carrying the weight of those 10 days. But amid that pain, there was one small thing. Cord, the son of the man who grew up without a father, the grandson of the father who left. Cord did not leave. The generational circle, the circle of absence that Vernel Varnado started, that Snoop nearly repeated, that circle for the first time was broken, not by victory, but by the choice to stay. 2 years later, it was the compas's turn to be lost. In 2021, the COVID-19 pandemic was still ravaging America. And Beverly Tate, Snoop's mother, the woman from Macomb, Mississippi, the one who raised 3 sons alone, the one who nicknamed him Snoopy, the one who wrote Real Love, the one who called her son and pulled him back from the edge, was hospitalized in critical condition. Snoop posted on Instagram asking for prayers. "Please send special prayers for my mom this morning. Pray for her and for me." In July, the situation did not improve. Snoop posted again. "Need all my prayer warriors for mom right now, please and thank you." On October 24, 2021, Beverly Tate passed away at the age of 70. Snoop posted a photo of himself with his mother, writing, "Mom, thank you for giving birth to me." In another post, a photo of Beverly holding a bouquet of flowers. Snoop wrote, "Thank God for giving me an angel for a mother." Then added, "Mom taught me to read and write. Taught me how to struggle and fight and all the truths of life. Now Mom finally has her wings." The next day at a concert in Boston, Snoop stood on stage in front of thousands of people and opened with Ben E. King's "Stand By Me." A red neon heart lit up behind him. He did not explain. He did not need to explain. Thousands of people cheered, and he stood there under the stage lights 24 hours after burying the only woman who had the right to call him out and tell him he was wrong. The stage lights could not erase the darkness inside. They only made the darkness harder to see. She was the one who knew him before the stadiums, before the platinum plaques, before the world learned his name by heart. And when she died, he lost the last voice that had the right to remind him that he was still Calvin, not Snoop Dogg. That he was still her son, not anyone's national treasure. But the losses did not stop. In February 2024, Bing Worthington Jr., Snoop's half-brother, born in 1979, passed away at the age of 44. Bing was no outsider. He started as a roadie for Snoop, then managed Snoop Dogg skateboards, then co-founded Dogg Records in Canada, then became the official tour manager. Bing was not just a brother. Bing was the one who walked with Snoop through every stage, every city, every tour for more than 2 decades. Snoop posted a series of tribute photos on Instagram. A photo of the two brothers standing side by side. Then an old video filmed at the cemetery. Snoop writing, "You always made us laugh. You've gone home to mom now." A photo of Bing and Beverly together smiling. "You've gone home to mom." In less than 3 years, Snoop lost both his mother and his brother. 2 people from the house that Beverly Tate had kept standing through sheer will for decades. And then, on January 18, 2024, when Snoop was at his absolute peak, having just bought Death Row, just performed at the Super Bowl, preparing for the Paris Olympics, his 24-year-old daughter, Corey, posted from a hospital bed. "I had a serious stroke this morning. I cried my eyes out when they told me. Corey had stopped all her lupus medication on her own about 5 months earlier, switching to natural methods. Her body could not take it. Kidney failure. Stroke. 24 years old. She added one more line, and that line hurt more than any lyric Snoop had written in 30 years of his career. I'm only 24 years old. What did I do in the past to deserve all of this? Doctors confirmed that lupus patients have a 4 to 8 times higher risk of stroke than normal people. A few days later, Corey updated, the doctors say the condition is improving a lot, but improving does not mean cured. Lupus is not cured. It only waits. And Snoop, the man who had just carried the Olympic torch, who had just been called a national treasure, once again sat by his daughter's bed and could do nothing but hold her hand. If you place this chain of losses on a timeline, the paradox appears with brutal clarity. 2019, grandson Kai Love, 10 days old. 2021, mother Beverly Tate, 70 years old. 2024, brother Bing Worthington, 44 years old. 2024, daughter Corey suffered a stroke, 24 years old. 4 crises in 5 years. And these were exactly the 5 years when Snoop reached cultural heights never before seen. Super Bowl 2022, buying death row in 2022, Paris Olympics 2024, being called America's national treasure. The years that crowned him were also the years that buried the people he loved. Alongside all of this, there is Shantae, the girl who went to prom with him in 1989. The woman who endured affairs, a child out of wedlock, divorce papers, and 30 years living next to one of the most famous men on the planet. In 2004, at the absolute peak of his career, Snoop filed for divorce. He later admitted, I thought I was the #1 man and I was ready to give up what I had at home for that until I realized that what I had at home was irreplaceable. He withdrew the divorce papers. In 2008, he renewed his vows. Nearly 30 years and counting, a number almost unimaginable in an industry that swallows marriages for breakfast. The boy who grew up with no model for lasting love built a lasting love for himself with his own hands. Not perfect, not pretty, full of cracks and betrayal, but stubbornly refusing to die. At 54, Snoop is no longer the gangster rapper of Doggy Style, no longer the Crips kid from East Side Long Beach. Now Calvin Cortazar Broadus Jr. is the owner of Death Row Records, a businessman with an estimated net worth of $160 million, a coach on The Voice, a grandfather of 9 grandchildren, and a man still releasing music regularly. But those numbers are only the surface. Behind them is something no chart can measure. The way a man lives with himself when the lights go out. And here the most beautiful image is not Snoop on the Super Bowl stage or Snoop carrying the Olympic torch. The most beautiful image is Papa Snoop, as his grandchildren call him, dressing up as a cartoon character for a grandchild's birthday. Kneeling down to be at eye level with the children he loves more than any platinum plaque. He told the Today Show, laughing, there was one granddaughter who at first would not come near him. Kept saying, go away, until he bribed her with a lollipop. And from then on, she stuck to him like glue. But behind that humorous story is a much heavier truth. He admitted that as a grandfather, he tries not to repeat the mistakes he made raising his own children, spending more time, being more present. The boy who grew up without a father became the father who was once too absent and is now becoming the grandfather who refuses to be absent another day. The circle does not close with repetition. It closes with repair. But this script would not be honest if it stopped there at the warm image of Papa Snoop and the enduring love with Shantae. Because Snoop Dogg is also the man who threatened a black woman on social media in front of millions of people. The man who cheated and had a child out of wedlock while his wife was home raising the kids. He is all of those things at the same time. Remembering only the bright side is dishonest. Remembering only the dark side is unfair. He is the threat and the apology, the Crip walk and the Olympic torch. The father who was once absent and the grandfather who is present. The boy no one saw and the man the whole world cannot stop looking at. Snoop Dogg's ease is not carelessness. It never was carelessness. It is a victory, continuous day after day for 3 decades, of a man choosing to make the world feel that everything will be okay while his own world keeps catching fire. That ease is not indifference. It is courage. It is a decision made over and over across 30 years to keep the world smiling even when his own world is burning. He lost his father and chose to become a father, even if imperfectly. He lost his mother and chose to write a gospel album in her memory. He nearly lost his marriage and chose to stay. He lost his grandson after 10 days, and his family chose to draw closer instead of falling apart. And he is still here, still writing music, still being a grandfather, still standing beside Shantae. Life is still going on, and no one knows what the next chapter will write. When you look back at Snoop Dogg's entire extraordinary journey, what is the first thing that comes to mind? That laid-back voice, that G-funk rhythm, or the man who stood up after every fall, every time, for 30 years? Share your favorite memory in the comments below and join us in honoring the man who kept the whole world calm while his life was on fire. If this story touched you, subscribe to the channel and share the video so more people can know the real person behind the legend. Thank you for staying until the final minute. See you in the next story.